Mill barged into my hospital room with peoples right after I gave birth, and threw a party celebrating her son becoming a father without acknowledging me, so when I asked her to leave, she said I'm overreacting. The exhaustion after giving birth wasn't something I had truly prepared for. Everyone talks about the pain, the pushing, the moment you first hold your baby, but no one really tells you how it feels afterward. How every muscle in your body feels like it's given up. How your head swims from sheer exhaustion. How you just want silence, rest, and the warmth of your newborn pressed against you. That was exactly where I was. The nurses had finally cleared the room after the initial rush, leaving me and my husband, Iva, in a peaceful bubble with our baby boy. He was so tiny, wrapped snugly in his blanket, his little fingers curling and uncurling against my chest as I cradled him. For a moment, everything felt perfect, and then the door swung open. At first, I thought it was a nurse. But no, my mother-in-law Caroline strode in like she owned the place. Arms full of balloons and gifts, grinning ear to ear. My stomach tightened immediately, and I told Iva that I didn't want visitors just yet, that I needed rest. He swore he'd handle it, but judging by the way Caroline marched in, trailed by what had to be at least 10 people, I knew that hadn't happened. Iva barely had time to react before the flood started. More family members poured in, cousins, aunts, uncles, even a couple of friends of the family, people I had met once at our wedding and hadn't seen since. They talked loudly, cooing over the baby, took pictures without asking, and acted like this was some kind of party. I barely had the strength to sit up, let alone deal with this. I shot Iva a look, but he seemed frozen, overwhelmed himself. And then Caroline made everything worse. She clapped her hands together like an event host and declared that today was a celebration not just for the baby but for Iva because this was the day he was truly reborn as a father. And to properly commemorate this sacred moment, she had brought trays of food. I blinked in disbelief as I watched her direct people to start setting up platters of food in my hospital recovery room. The smell of it turned my already sensitive stomach. One of Iva's uncles made a joke about how Iva was officially one of the dads now, while another relative laughingly asked when we were planning on having another screamer. I wanted to shove them all out and remind them that this wasn't a baby shower. This wasn't a party. I had just given birth. I was sore, exhausted, and bleeding, barely keeping myself together. And yet, Caroline had somehow decided that this was her moment. She hovered over me, beaming, before patting Iva on the shoulder and dramatically announcing that she had never been prouder of her son, that after today, he was officially a man. Not a single word about me, not a single acknowledgement of the fact that I was the one who had just spent hours in labor bringing this child into the world. Iva finally shook off his daze and tried to intervene, telling her that we really needed rest and that this wasn't the time for a gathering. Caroline laughed it off, saying that family togetherness was more important and that we needed to cherish this moment. And that was when I snapped. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to sit up. I didn't care how I looked. Messy hair, hospital gown, barely able to hold myself upright. I stared at Caroline and told her that this was not a party and that she and everyone else needed to leave. She had the audacity to laugh. She actually waved a hand at me like I was being dramatic and said I was just emotional from childbirth, that I would look back and thank her for making this a special occasion. Something inside me burned red hot. But before I could say anything else, one of the nurses walked in. She immediately took one look at the crowded room, the food, the noise, and her expression turned deadly. Her voice was sharp as she asked what was going on. She questioned how we had gotten so many visitors approved on top of food. She was glaring at everybody. Iva barely had time to stammer a response before the nurse firmly stated that this was a recovery room, not a party hall, that I was a patient and needed rest, not a social gathering, and that everybody who was not my husband needed to leave immediately. There was a long, awkward silence. Caroline looked around as if expecting people to argue. No one did. A few relatives mumbled apologies and shuffled towards the door, clearly embarrassed. But Caroline lingered. She turned back to me, her voice dropping into a hurt tone, saying she couldn't believe I was being so cold, that all she wanted was to celebrate the birth of her grandson, and that I was ruining the moment. I barely had the energy to respond. I just stared at her, exhausted, and told her flatly that this wasn't about her. Her lips thinned, but before she could argue, the nurse stepped closer and asked if she needed security to escort her out. That got her moving. She huffed, muttering about how ungrateful I was, but she left. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I slumped back against the pillows. Iva looked shaken, finally muttering an apology. He said he hadn't realized things would get so out of hand, that he should have stopped her sooner. I was too tired to argue. I just told him that I wanted to sleep and that I needed silence. When I woke up, my body ached from exhaustion, but my mind was still spinning, running on the last fumes of adrenaline. Iva sat beside me, rubbing his face with both hands, looking every bit as overwhelmed as I felt. He mumbled that he hadn't expected things to go that far, that he had assumed his mother would just pop in for a quick visit, say congratulations, and then leave. I stared at him, barely believing what I was hearing. After everything Caroline had done since the start of my pregnancy, the unsolicited advice, the boundary stomping, the way she had acted like this baby was hers, Iva had actually thought she would behave normally. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and told him that I didn't want to talk about his mother anymore. I just wanted to rest, to recover, to hold our baby in peace. Ivan nodded, guilt written all over his face. He hesitated for a moment and then reached for my hand and squeezed it. He promised he'd handle everything and that he wouldn't let his mother ruin this for us. I wanted to believe him, but I knew Caroline, and I knew this wasn't over. A couple of hours later, Iva had barely stepped out to grab coffee when his phone started buzzing on the side table. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I ignored it. A minute later, it rang again and again and again. Finally, I turned the phone over and put it on silent so I didn't have to look at it anymore. But then my own phone vibrated from the bedside tray. A message from Caroline. Unbelievable. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. You should be ashamed of yourself. I didn't reply, and then another. I was only trying to celebrate my grandson's birth. But I guess you don't care about family. This is what I get for trying to be involved. And another. You are so ungrateful. I hope you realize what you've done. You've embarrassed me in front of the entire family. I locked my phone. She could scream into the void all she wanted. I wasn't playing this game. Iva returned a few minutes later holding a cup of juice. He sat down heavily in the chair beside me and muttered that he had just checked his messages. I asked him if he finally understood, if he finally saw how ridiculous his mother was being. He exhaled and nodded. He admitted that at first he had thought I was being too harsh, that maybe we could have let her stay for a little while. But after seeing her messages, after realizing she wasn't apologizing, wasn't even considering that she had done something wrong, he finally saw what I had been trying to tell him for months. Caroline wasn't just overbearing. She was entitled. She didn't care about boundaries. She didn't care about my recovery. She didn't even really care about the baby in the way a grandmother should. She just cared about how she looked. He apologized. Really apologized. Not just some half-hearted I should have stopped her, but a real, genuine apology. He said he would call her and tell her to back off, that if she kept this up, she wasn't going to see us with a baby for a long time. Update 1. That night, I thought we had peace. The nurses had moved us to a new recovery room, a decision they made without me even having to ask. Apparently, they had seen stunts like Caroline's before, and they didn't want to risk her causing another scene. The new room was in a different section, and our information was marked as private, meaning only approved visitors could come in. It was exactly what I needed. For the first time all day, I felt like I could finally breathe. I was also happy that I wasn't in some overcrowded city hospital. I was grateful that they had extra rooms available. Then around 8 o'clock in the evening, one of the nurses came in with an odd look on her face. She hesitated before telling me that there had been someone at the front desk asking for our room number. I felt my stomach drop. Caroline. The nurse continued, saying that the person had insisted she was family and that she needed to see us and that it was an emergency. When the receptionist refused to give her the information, Caroline had apparently started crying, claiming she was being kept away from her grandchild. My jaw clenched. I asked if she was still there, and the nurse shook her head. Security had been called to escort her out. I wanted to laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. Caroline had really tried to force her way back in. Iva was furious. He grabbed his phone, called her, and before she could get a word in, told her that if she ever pulled something like this again, she wouldn't be seeing her grandson at all. She started yelling about how she was the grandmother, about how she had a right to be there. Iva didn't argue. He just told her that she had lost the privilege of visiting by acting like a spoiled child. And then he hung up. I stared at him, still processing the fact that he had actually stood up to her. He's usually a deer in the headlights type of person. He met my gaze and told me he meant every word. Caroline wasn't going to ruin this experience for us. And if she wanted to keep acting like this, she was only going to push herself further and further away. Update 2. I had a lot of bleeding and tearing, so I had to stay in the hospital for a couple of days. We thought that would be the end of it, but we were wrong because a day later, Caroline tried again. This time, she showed up with 2 of Iva's aunts, claiming that they had the right to see the baby. She demanded to know why no one would tell her where we were. She threw an absolute tantrum in the hospital lobby, loud enough that one of the nurses later told me it had nearly escalated into them calling the police. Iva was done. He sent her one final text. You have completely disrespected us, our boundaries, and my wife's recovery. You are not entitled to this baby. If you keep this up, you won't be seeing him at all. And then he blocked her. I can't even explain how good it felt to see him finally take a stand. Update 3. For the first time since giving birth, I finally felt like I could relax. With Iva standing firm and the hospital enforcing strict privacy, Caroline had no way of getting to us. I spent the next day focusing on what actually mattered, recovering and bonding with my baby. We would soon go home. But peace in our world apparently meant chaos in Caroline's. Because when she realized she had been completely cut off, she did what narcissists do best. She played the victim. The first sign that something was brewing came when my phone started buzzing nonstop. I had ignored most of my notifications since giving birth, assuming they were just well wishes from friends and extended family, but when I glanced at my screen and saw a flood of messages from Iva's cousins, my stomach sank. Curious, I clicked on one, And there it was. A long, dramatic Facebook post from Caroline painting herself as the grieving grandmother who had been cruelly denied access to her first grandchild. She wrote that after everything she had done for Iva, after all the sacrifices she had made as a mother, this was how she was repaid. She wasn't even allowed to hold her grandbaby. She had been thrown out of the hospital like a criminal. Then she started spinning a new narrative. She claimed that I had been the one manipulating Iva, that ever since he married me, he had become cold and distant towards his family, that I had brainwashed him into cutting off his own mother. And to top it all off, she ended with a plea to her Facebook friends. Please pray for me during this difficult time. I only wanted to be there for my grandson, but I guess some people don't believe in family anymore. The post had gained traction, and dozens of comments flooded in, mostly from her equally dramatic friends, offering her sympathy and validating her martyr complex. I rolled my eyes. Iva walked in just as I was reading the post. I handed him my phone and watched as he skimmed through it. His expression darkened. He muttered that she had really lost it. I told him I wasn't surprised. Caroline had always been like this, turning herself into the victim whenever she didn't get her way. Iva exhaled and shook his head, saying that he was going to call his cousins and set the record straight before this nonsense spread any further. It didn't take long for the family to start picking sides. Some of Iva's relatives, especially the ones who knew how Caroline really was, immediately messaged him, telling him to ignore her dramatics. They assured him that no one reasonable was buying into her sob story. But then there were the others, the ones who had always been wrapped around Caroline's manipulative little finger. A few of them started sending Iva angry messages. One of his uncles wrote that no matter what drama had happened at the hospital, Iva should have at least let his mother see her grandchild. Another relative accused me of turning Iva against his own family. And then came the kicker. Iva's aunt, Caroline's older sister, left him a voicemail filled with passive-aggressive disappointment. She said she never thought he would be the type of man to abandon his mother and that Caroline had been so excited for this baby, and now he was punishing her by keeping the child away from her. I listened to it in silence. He looked at me and told me he was done playing nice. If these people wanted to blindly believe Caroline, that was their problem. He wasn't going to waste his energy explaining himself to people who refused to see the truth. I smiled. But Caroline, she wasn't done yet. Later that evening, as I was nursing the baby and enjoying the rare moment of peace, there was a sudden knock on our hospital room door. Iva and I exchanged wary glances. The hospital had explicitly told us that no one could visit without our approval. Iva stood up, walked to the door, and cracked it open just enough to see who it was. Then he groaned. It was a priest. I blinked in confusion as Iva stepped out into the hallway, speaking to the man in hushed tones. I could only catch bits and pieces of their conversation, but the words family reconciliation and forgiveness made my blood pressure spike. Iva came back a minute later looking utterly exhausted. Apparently, Caroline had sent a priest from her church to our hospital room. Why? Because she thought a third-party intervention would guilt us into letting her back in. I was done. I told Iva to handle it. Because if I had to deal with one more stunt, I was going to lose my mind. Iva marched back out and told the priest politely but firmly that this was not a matter of family reconciliation, that Caroline had violated our boundaries, that she had disrespected my recovery, and that she was now trying to manipulate her way back in. The priest, to his credit, seemed a little embarrassed. He apologized for the intrusion and left. Iva shut the door, turned back to me, and asked if I was absolutely sure that Caroline wasn't possessed. Because at this point, it was the only explanation. I laughed. I hoped I didn't have to deal with her anymore. Update 4. After Iva shut the door on the priest, I really thought that was it. I thought Caroline would finally accept that we weren't going to let her bulldoze her way into our lives, that she would back off and find someone else to manipulate. I was wrong. Because when she realized that she couldn't get to us through guilt, she decided to escalate her antics one last time. And this time, she went after the one thing she knew would get a reaction out of me. The next morning, a nurse came into our room carrying a box. She said someone had left it at the front desk, claiming it was a gift for the new parents. Since there was no name or sender information, the hospital staff checked it for safety reasons before bringing it to us. I hesitated, my gut immediately telling me that this was Caroline's doing. Iva, however, just sighed, grabbed the box, and opened it. The moment I saw what was inside, my blood ran cold. It was a collection of baby items. But not just any baby items. They were all monogrammed with Caroline's name. The onesies, the bibs, the blankets. Everything had baby Caroline embroidered on it as if our baby belonged to her. And sitting right on top was a handwritten note. Iva picked it up and read it out loud. She had written that she forgave us, that she understood we were just overwhelmed with new parenthood, which is why we had overreacted by cutting her off. She knew we would come around once we realized how much we needed her guidance. Then she wrote the part that made my stomach turn. She said she had already announced to all of her friends that she would be taking an active role in raising the baby because, in her words, this was the rebirth of her son. She had a right to be involved. She finished with a smug little note saying that she was already planning the baby's welcoming party at her house and that we should be ready to hand the baby over for the weekend soon. I could not believe what I was reading. He was a newborn, for Christ's sake. And my baby was a boy. Did she not know that? From where did baby Caroline appear? I wouldn't name my child after her, even if it was a girl. I wasn't even angry. I was disturbed. Caroline wasn't just overstepping. She was acting like my child was her property. I looked at Iva, expecting him to be just as horrified as I was, and he was. But more than that, he looked furious. Iva had always been the calm one in our marriage. He was patient, rational, and rarely ever lost his temper. Yes, he was a little timid, but this was his breaking point. He muttered that he was done playing games. He grabbed his phone and called his mother right there in the hospital room. The moment she picked up, he told her that this was the final straw. He said he didn't know what delusion she had built in her head, but our child was not hers. She had no say in how we raised our baby. And after this stunt, she would never be meeting our child ever. Caroline immediately burst into tears. She wailed that he was being cruel, that she was just trying to help, and that he was breaking her heart. She asked how he could do this to his own mother after everything she had done for him. Iva didn't budge. He told her that she had done this to herself, that every action she had taken, from ambushing us in the hospital to calling in family to guilt trip him to this creepy possession fantasy, had only proved one thing. She didn't respect him. She didn't respect me. And most importantly, she didn't respect our baby and our boundaries. And if she couldn't do that, she wasn't going to be in our lives. Then he hung up. And just like that, it was over. Update 5. Caroline must have realized that she couldn't get to Iva anymore because that day, within an hour, she was back on Facebook, and this time she went nuclear. She posted an even longer rant than before. But this time she wasn't just playing the victim. She was playing the warrior mother who had been betrayed. She wrote that Iva had been stolen from her by a heartless, controlling woman, aka me. She claimed that she had only wanted to be involved as a grandmother, but that I had brainwashed her son into believing she was a monster. Then she dropped a line that really made my blood boil. She claimed that I was using the baby to punish her, as if my entire reason for keeping my child away from her wasn't because of her insane behavior, but because I was some vindictive wife who just hated her for no reason. And just like last time, her post was flooded with supportive comments from her enablers. But this time, there were also comments from people who were starting to see through her act. Some of Iva's cousins started calling her out, asking what exactly she had done to make Iva go no contact so suddenly. One even asked if she had crossed a line that she wasn't admitting to. And then there was the best part. Iva's uncle, the same one who had originally sent an angry message siding with Caroline, replied with a single sentence. I just spoke to Iva. I take back everything I said. That was it. And it was glorious. After that post, we knew Caroline wasn't going to back down anytime soon. So, we took the final steps to shut her out completely. I blocked her everywhere. We told the hospital to put a red flag on our records. If anyone tried to access information about me or the baby without our consent, they were to be denied. We even had a conversation with our pediatrician to ensure our baby's medical records were locked down from anyone outside of Iva and me. We weren't taking any risks. Update 6. Getting discharged from the hospital should have been a relief after everything Caroline had pulled. I just wanted to go home, shut the door, and finally enjoy the peace of being in my own space with my baby and my husband. And for a while, it felt like we could. Iva and I had taken every precaution to keep Caroline out of our lives. She was blocked on everything. The hospital had been warned, and we had already told a few people we did trust that we weren't going to entertain any drama. The drive home was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I let myself relax. Iva kept checking on me, asking if I was comfortable. I just kept telling him I was fine because for the first time I was. But of course it was too good to last because while we had been so focused on keeping Caroline out of the hospital, we had completely forgotten one thing. She knew where we lived, and she was waiting. The moment we pulled into our driveway, I knew something was wrong. There were balloons tied to our front porch. A banner hung across the door that said, "Welcome home, baby." And worst of all, Caroline was standing right there on our lawn, surrounded by a handful of family members, grinning like she had just won. My heart dropped. How did she know we were discharged today? Iva parked the car, but didn't move for a second. His grip on the steering wheel was so tight, his knuckles turned white. I could tell he was fuming. I couldn't even speak. I was so tired, so emotionally drained. I just wanted to go inside. And Caroline, in all her audacity, was waving at us, like she actually thought we would just smile and go along with whatever delusional little fantasy she had cooked up. Then she started walking towards the car. Iva was out of the driver's seat before she could even get close. I couldn't hear what he said at first, but his body language said enough. He was done. Caroline was gesturing wildly, acting like she didn't understand why he was upset. She kept looking at the car as if expecting me to get out and start thanking her. I sat there, gripping the baby's car seat, doing my best to just breathe. I wanted this to be over. Iva turned back to me, opened the door, and asked if I wanted to go inside while he dealt with it. I nodded because at this point, I just didn't have the energy to keep doing this. I unbuckled the baby, cradling him against my chest, and stepped out of the car. And Caroline, ever the narcissist, lunged forward like she was about to take the baby from my arms. Iva blocked her immediately. I walked straight to the front door, ignoring whatever tantrum she was throwing behind me, and went inside. And the moment I shut the door, I locked it. Iva wasn't far behind me. I heard him say something final to her, something low and firm that I couldn't quite catch, before he walked in and slammed the door shut behind him. He exhaled, rubbing his face, and then he turned to me and said, "It's done." Caroline was gone. She had tried one last desperate stunt, and when it hadn't worked, she had finally left. After that, things were quiet for a while. I don't know what he said to her. I asked him, but he didn't tell me. Iva and I settled into life with the baby. The house was peaceful. But Caroline, she did not go quietly. She took to social media again, of course, and this time her meltdown was even more unhinged. She made a huge post ranting about how we had ripped her grandchild away from her, how she had done everything for Iva his entire life only for him to abandon her now. She made herself sound like a poor, grieving mother who had lost her son to an evil, controlling woman. Again, me. She even tried getting sympathy from other family members. But at this point, people were done with her nonsense because you know who saw her post? Iva's uncle. The same uncle who had initially sided with her but then realized how crazy she was acting. And this time he didn't hold back. He commented, telling everyone that Caroline had ambushed us in the hospital, violated my recovery space, and even tried to turn our homecoming into a spectacle after we had already made it clear we wanted space. He called her out point blank and told her that she had done this to herself. And that was when people really started turning on her. The likes on her posts started disappearing. The supportive comments, they slowed down. And in their place, people were asking questions. They started wondering if maybe, just maybe, Caroline wasn't the victim she was pretending to be. And that was the final nail in the coffin. Update 7. Iva and I haven't heard from Caroline since then. She hasn't tried to reach out. She hasn't shown up at our house again. It's like she finally realized that she lost. And honestly, I don't care what she does from here on out because my priority isn't her. It's my family. And right now, my baby is healthy. I am finally feeling like myself again. Iva and I are closer than ever. And most importantly, we're happy without her.